Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition episode of the Blades Banter Podcast. This is a different type of video that I've been toying around with doing for a couple months. I wanted it initially to be a discussion-based type of video that just didn't come together. So I decided that I would try to do a little bit of a solo project here and kind of see how it goes and see what the feedback was before I kind of embark on doing any other episodes. But this is kind of just where I'd like to begin and see where everything falls before kind of diving myself into everything else with the ideas that I have planned. So basically the essence of this video is going to be looking at meeting the players and meeting the players involved in the US Ice Dance Edition. Looking at the ice dance field in the US, you have such an array of individuals that are coming back. You have the Shibutanis who are coming back, and then you have people that are established like Chock and Bates, and then individuals um, that are on the up, like Emily Zingas and Kolesnik and Ian Somerville and Emily Brady. So it's just kind of taking a look at where all six teams this year lie going into the Olympic season and where they are going to need to do the work to build themselves into making a case for that Olympic team. And so the idea of this is kind of to bridge the gap between viewers that are new to the sport and trying to figure out what is ice dance and what is this all about, and those who are knowledgeable about the sport, who've been following for a long time, and where they can gather information from this video as well to make informed opinions on the ice dance teams. Um, so looking at kind of how I'm going to do this video, we're going to kind of discuss about the qualification process for the Olympics. And oh my God, this kind of sounds like like a PowerPoint, like you're listening to like a teacher PowerPoint. And I'm going to try to make it a little bit not like that, but I do want to have a little bit of structure to the video, which I know that like that is important. I think for some of our viewers, it definitely is important for me to stay organized and like know what I'm doing. But so our video structure is going to talk a lot about both the players, the qualification process, and then how who we think is a lock or who I think is a lock, and who I think has a bit of a chance to maybe make a move, or someone who might really have to put in a lot of work to make any move to get consideration. Um, yeah, so starting here with the Olympic criteria. So the USFS has a Olympic criteria guideline, and I will link it in the video description box below of how everyone's selected. I pretty much just took the information from the athlete selection, like the calculation of the data, which would be um, what they use, like what events they look at to determine who gets on that Olympic team. And so basically, what they do is they kind of have this calculation where they assign points to how the results have impacted or the results have been established at specific events that they lay out. So they look at the criteria from the past, both this Olympic season coming up and then the previous season, the 2024-2025 season. So the what they look at specifically from the previous season will be the 2025 US Championships, the 2025 World Junior Championships, which I added that there. There is a team that technically went to Junior Worlds that is Olympic eligible. I don't really think they are a factor. So excuse me, I need some water. I don't really think they're a factor for the Olympic team. But I decided to include that because it was included in the guidelines. And you can use that potentially for other disciplines when you look at the US women, for example. Um, they look at the 2025 Four Continents Championships and the World Championships. And so with each of these events, there are factors that will go in. That's more so towards this season, where the factors will be applied to the Grand Prix final and the Junior Grand Prix final, as well as the team with the highest Grand Prix score on the circuit. We'll get an additional 1.25 points, and then the US Championships will also get a factor. So they're also taking a look at the Grand Prix results, the average score per team. So they'll be able to calculate each team's average scores on the Grand Prix from their two assignments or one assignment potentially if they only have one. And use that competitive comparatively scores to kind of put the teams head to head. Now there are teams that potentially will be going head to head on the Grand Prix, and that is something that I think also will be not specifically laid out in the guidelines, but something that they will definitely use to kind of figure out where which teams will rank ahead of each other when you go into nationals. They also look at the average challenger score for each of the teams. Now, when you get into teams like Madison, Chock, and Evan Bates, they likely will not be doing a challenger. But when you look at their from last season, they were first at the World Championships, first at US Nationals, and second at Four Continents. They already have such a head up and above all these other teams that they've kind of they've built up that residue of points already that they can skip the Challenger Series and not really be affected by the not having that a part of their selection criteria. So let's start talking just a little bit about the players. So there's 6 teams that we're going to be covering. I would say when we get to the locks, I really only think there's one lock at this point. And it would be this team, Madison Chock and Evan Bates. Madison Chock and Evan Bates, they're 3-time world champions. They've won 3 times. They've won the past 3 world championships, 2023, 2024, and 2025. They're a 6-time US champion and 2-time Grand Prix final champion. And I think for them, like, you look at just the collection of information, collection of data, and collection of accolades that they've had over their career. I mean, they're a 6-time world medalist, a 7-time Grand Prix final medalist, 8-time Four Continents medalist. I mean, they pretty much have this Olympic spot locked and ready to go. Like, there's no way that this team will not be involved in going to the Olympics this year, and also probably participating in that team event. I mean, they've just done so much for US ice dance in terms of their longevity, their competitiveness, and their ability to be consistent, which I will get to in a minute. But they've just done so much work for this country for ice dance that it just would be a shock if this team, regardless of even if they skip their Grand Prix, like this team, I think, in my opinion, is an automatic lock. And for them, their strengths really come from their program design. One of the limitations, though, that this team has is in the skating skills department, specifically for Madison. Maddie's known not for maybe having the best depth of edge, the best glide and speed. This team is notoriously a little bit slower compared to some of the other ice dance teams, but the way that they're able to weave programs to highlight Madison's charisma and her charm, as well as having very unique lift positions and kind of interesting programs. They very much know how to accentuate what they are the best at, and that really allows for them to kind of mask some of the deficiencies that they have as a team. But I will say, when I talked about their consistency over the years, one of their limitations, I think, is their consistency at the bigger moments. They fell in 2023 at the World Championships. They made a mistake in 2024 at the free dance. They fell in 2018 at the Olympic Games in their free dance. So this team is a bit error prone during the bigger moments, and that is something that can be a bit of a question mark going into the Olympics of whether or not they could get that gold medal. It's going to come down to their consistency on whether or not they can handle the pressure at the big moments. But I think for looking at the purpose of this video, I mean, this team is just an absolute automatic lock, and there just is no reason, rhyme or reason, that this team would not be on the Olympic team at all. Which brings me to our next team, Christina Carreira and Anthony Ponomarenko. So this team has kind of been the second place ice dance team for the U.S. for the past 2 seasons. They've done a lot of good work in the past during this quad, specifically because the previous quad, they really weren't getting the respect and recognition that they deserved. And they've kind of stuck it out. I mean, they've really put in the work and improved themselves. They moved to London, Ontario to work with Scott Moyer, Madison Hubble, Adrian Diaz, and a little bit with Patrice Lauzon, who is in Montreal. Um, and they've really made impacts this season or this past quad. They're a two-time four continents bronze medalist. One of them came within this quad in 2024. They've won two. Uh, they've medaled actually at every single nationals in the past 3 years. Um, Two silvers and a bronze. They were top 10 at the Worlds for the past 3 years as well. Um, I would say for this team, and they had the highest average score um, of the teams that were not Madison Hubble, and I'm sorry, I'm not Madison Chock and Evan Bates. So they pretty much have just kind of continued to grind and do the work to get themselves elevated in terms of status and ranking in ice dance. And I highlighted the one of their strengths is their consistency. I mean, they very rarely go out and make a mistake. Like when you talk about Maddie and Evan, they normally will have a little bit of a fluke here and there throughout the season. Christina and Anthony rarely go out and make a mistake on any of their programs. They're very precise. I think when you talk about the types of programs they do, I think they have a bit of divided fans. I think some fans are very interested in the programs that they do, and some may fall and call them a little bit flat. So I think when you look at the programs, they may not be the most exciting team of all the U.S. dance teams, but I think what they really have going for them is just their strength and their consistency and their ability to really work and make anything happen. Now, looking at a limitation for this team, the biggest question mark, and we have had citizen issues arise for some ice dance teams in the past. That is something that is very much in question for this team. She's a Canadian citizen. She's been awaiting citizenship for a long time, and we are kind of unsure about the status of what her citizenship is. There's been rumblings that potentially it may not happen, but that's also just a rumor. So we don't really know specifically what is the citizenship status for her. She's said in interviews that it should be good to go for the fall. So I think when you get Christina saying that there is a chance of hope that she should get citizenship, I think that's a good sign when she herself is coming out and saying that there is a good potential for them to get citizenship. Because if this team doesn't get citizenship, then they would unfortunately be unable to go to the Olympics. And I think that is really an unfortunate case for them because they've really put in so much work over this past quad and have rose in the standings so quickly that that's really would be a shame for them not to be able to reap the rewards of the hard work that they've put in. Um, which brings us to our next team, Caroline Green and Michael Parsons. So Caroline and Michael have kind of had a bit of an odd quad for them. They've been a little bit up and they've been a little bit down in terms of where they've been. They've had the highs of being second at nationals, top six in the world, and then also being sixth at U.S. championships in 2024 due to injury for Michael. And I think for them, the biggest thing is, are they going to be able to be healthy? Are they going to have a program that highlights them in the best way possible? And how are they going to factor in the fall? Because, last fall, it really was a battle between Caroline and Michael and Emilia and Vadim, who we will get to, for that potential third spot at the World Championships. And I think that that was something that a lot of people had question marks coming in, was whether or not it would be Caroline and Michael or it would be Emily and Vadim. They are trained by former Olympic champion Charlie White and former Olympic silver medalist Tanith White, or Tanith Belbin, formerly, and also Greg Zerline, who was a former partner with Madison Chock back in the 2010-29 era, or 2009 era. So for this team, I think for them, their biggest limitation potentially is the program concepts. And normally they do come out and do have unique programs, but normally the concepts aren't necessarily something that stick with them. And that's just kind of been an issue that they've had since they've moved to Tanith and Charlie and Greg, is they haven't ever been accentuated in the same way that they were when they were with their previous coaches. You know, they've tried to find their voice on the ice, and it just seems like it's been a bit of a struggle for them. Um, Being able to uh, find their voice on the ice. Now, looking at their accolades, they are a 2022 Four Continents champion. That doesn't really factor in, though, at the Olympics for the Olympic selection. Because remember, the Olympic selection is specifically only 2024, 2025, and the 25-26 season. And looking at this, they have two challenger medals from last season. That also won't be in contention because the criteria is very specific about the previous season. Now, they did go to the World Championships last year, and they finished on the podium at U.S. Championships last season. They finished third at U.S. Championships, and they were ninth at Worlds in 2025. Um, so I think for them, that is a big step up for them when you start comparing them to some of the teams that we're going to get to here, with those teams who didn't get to go to the Four Continents, and some didn't get to go to Four Continents or Worlds, and didn't fare as well at U.S. Championships. So Caroline and Michael, although I say TBD, they really have already started to build a case for themselves because they were able to go to these events on the later half of the season because of the success at the U.S. Championships. And for them, that's really going to be in their benefit because now they're going to be able to come onto the Challenger Series, build up good scores there, and take the momentum that they had from last season with a top 10 finish at Worlds. I mean, that was very successful for them, especially because of the setbacks that they've had in the past season where it kind of looked like they were being dropped by the judges. Now, our next team, this is probably one of the most anticipated teams that I think individuals are really looking forward to seeing on the Grand Prix circuit this season. And they're returning from a 7-year hiatus to try and qualify for that Olympic team. And this is the three-time world medalist, four-time Four Continents champion, two-time Grand Prix final bronze medalist, and the 2018 Olympic individual bronze and team bronze medalist, Maya and Alex Shibutani. And they are very much a bit of a question mark at this point because we haven't really seen anything from them. We have had no updates at all since they've announced their comeback. They've been very quiet about what they're working on, where they're training, what they're looking for, what they were going to be bringing to the ice this season. And I think for them, that's good and also bad at the same time because for them, they have no criteria at all. I mean, I know I just rattled off all these fantastic different accolades that they have, but that's all from like 7 to 10 years ago for some of it. And that can't be used in content. That cannot be used in their criteria to make this Olympic team. And for them, I think looking at their strengths, they were probably one of the most. I talked about Christina and Anthony's precision and consistency. This team was the absolute definition of like razor sharp thin consistency. They would always go out there. They had very nice carriage, very nice body line. Their programs, albeit they may not have been sometimes the most interesting, they always had a perspective on the ice that you could appreciate. And that's something that coming back now, it's kind of been lost on ice dance as a whole over the past quad. And this could be just a bit of a breath of fresh air for some of the judges when they come back and see this. Now, looking additionally at their strengths, they have Marina Zueva on their coaching staff. And Marina Zueva is very much a famous ice dance coach. She's been in this game for more than enough years. And she knows how to wheel and deal and get her teams where they need to be and get these teams to the Olympic Games and in the shape that they need to be to qualify for these events. She's also has very good connections with the USFS and making sure that she can talk and negotiate and kind of connect with the judges and the officials to kind of see where her teams need improvements and how they can get the scores to place well at events and at US championships. But I think one of the biggest limitations for this team, though, this season is going to be that training time, the competition experience that they have not had over 7 years. And you have to remember, this team last competed at the 2018 Olympics. That was their last competition. They have not even competed a second in the plus five, minus five judging system. And with all these new ice dance rules that we've seen incorporated over the season, it's really kind of going to be like a foreign language, I think, for them of having these new elements that they have to master and figure out how to maximize their points. Now, the Shibutanis, I think they are more than capable of doing that, but it is going to be a bit of a difficult task for them to kind of get into form for this Olympic and this season after they um, have taken such a long time off. Additionally, they don't have any scores. No average scores from the previous season. No average scores from 7 years. They have no criteria at this point, and it's surprising that we haven't seen them yet on the challenger circuit because, or even entered in any of the challenger circuits because they have no criteria. They need to come out and really build a reputation for themselves and kind of build this criteria so that they're able to make that team. Because I don't think that they're coming back to not make an Olympic team. I just don't see it. I don't see them coming back just for fun to try to say, oh, maybe we'll make it. Like, I think they're coming back to legitimately try to make a team. And I'm a bit flabbergasted why we haven't seen them on the Challenger Series yet. Me, sorry, I had to make some edits to a slide and there is a bit of an error, so I had to make an edit. So I'll have to patch this all together. So, sorry, but getting back to Emilia and Vadim. So I'm just gonna restart from the top from Emilia and Vadim. So they were in contention with Caroline Green and Michael Parsons for that world spot this season. And it really was between them. You know, you had them, the two of them on the Grand Prix. I don't remember if they went up against each other, but the two were definitely head to head for that spot. And you had Emily and Vadim and Caroline and Michael. I think they ended up, I think like a point separated, a couple points separated between them at nationals. It might have even been less than a point that separated them at nationals for who got that third spot. So looking at the criteria, they both were on the podium at nationals because Peter Medal is a podium position at the U.S. Championships. For Emily and Vadim, they have finished in the top five at every single one of their Grand Prix these past seasons, and they've finished in the top five at four continents in the past 2 seasons. You know, when you're looking at Emily and Vadim, you might think that they may not be as in it as Carolyn and Michael in terms of the criteria, but they were able to go to the Four Continents Championships at this past season, where Caroline and Michael didn't go to the Four Continents because they were selected for Worlds. So Emily and Vadim and Caroline and Michael are kind of on the same page where they both were able to attend a championship event in the spring and also placed very well at the U.S. Championships. For this team, they're coached by Igor Shpilban and choreographed by Benoit Richaud. For them, you know, Igor Shpilban, in the same way as Marina Zueva, has a lot of deep ties to the U.S. officials and the U.S. judges just because of his longevity in the sport, his longevity specifically in the U.S., in Michigan. You know, he was a part of the coaching team for Charlie White, Maya and Alex Shibutani, Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer, just to name a few of the individuals that he's been with. And he knows how to wheel and deal and get his teams to be very well trained. For this team, a lot of their strengths will come from the intricacy and the choreography. Benoit Richaud really does do a well job of taking a team that's in front of him and finding music and choreography that speaks to who they are as characters, who they are as people. You know, he really takes a skater and looks at who they are and finds music that works for them and doesn't really try to place something on them. he makes their skating kind of breathe through their soul. Like their skating looks just like breath. Like it's natural. You breathe in, you breathe out. And Emily and Vidya, they're skating on one edge and skating on another edge together. And it just looks like their skating is just so fluid and so regal and fresh. It's kind of a very um, new take to ice dance of what we've seen. Now, I will say the thing that could be a bit of an issue for this team is just the fact that they are so new to dance. You know, Emilia has been only really in dance for 3 seasons, and switching from singles to dance is a bit of a transition, but she's done such a great job to make herself such an established dancer. But there are times when you watch them that you notice, you know, it may not be as deep of an edge. You know, the turns may not be what an ice dancer typically does. And that's just something that comes from time spent on the ice as a dancer and working together with your partner and your coaches to create that impactful moment and find the right skating skill set as a dancer. Um, there was also the question of citizenship for Vadim Kolesnik, but that has since become not an issue at all because he received his US citizenship in the past 2 weeks, I believe. So, you know, that was something that was a question mark of is Vadim going to get citizenship? Kind of in the same way of Christina, but he got his citizenship, so he is a US citizen. There is not really any issues with that now. So he's all set to go in terms of potentially making that Olympic team. But now they just have to build their reputation and build their criteria this fall um, at their challengers and at their Grand Prix events to become Olympians potentially. Yeah. So now we're going to go into two teams that when we get to looking at who I think has a legitimate chance, I think the next two teams are on the outside. And that is mainly based on due to their results and I think their youth. When I talk about their limitations, I think the biggest limitations of these next two teams is their youth. Both of these teams are extremely young on the senior circuit, and they just do not have the experience at the world level at some of these bigger events, like a Worlds or a Four Continents. So they just don't really have uh, the criteria that I think and the experience that I think would set them up to make an Olympic team. These two, in my opinion, I think are very much long shots, but they are within the top echelon of US dance teams that I think you could look at this team as probably a future for 2030. And the first team we're going to talk about is Emily Brady and Ian Somerville. And this team is very interesting. They train in Canton with Charlie White, Greg, and Tanith White. And they are, in essence, very similar, in my opinion, to Emilia and Vadim. And when I talk about that, I say that their skating really does feel natural and from the soul. The two of them do skate as one, and they skate together in a way that you feel an earnest honesty from them. You feel like they are sharing their story on the ice with you, where some of these other teams that I've talked about may not feel the exact same way. Um, for them, they finished at the bronze medal at the Grand Prix of France last season. They were selected to go to Worlds in 2024, and unfortunately, they did not make the free skate after a fluke fall in the rhythm dance. Um, and their peak, honestly, their peak so far, I think, was their 2024 season, when they were finished the bronze medalists and got to go to Worlds. They're kind of up and down. You know, last season they had a really great Grand Prix at the Grand Prix de France, which was their second, and then they had a really rough first outing at the Skate Canada International. So that's a bit of an issue with them is their inconsistency. You know, they had the mistake at Worlds too, and it's a bit of a learning curve for them, I think, because they are such talented skaters. I think the biggest strength for both of them is the skating skills. Specifically, his skating skills are gorgeous. Hers are fantastic as well. But when you compare it to him, it is a bit of a tough comparison because he's just so good. And that's not to say she isn't, but he is like magnificent with the skating skills. And she's very, very good too. Um, I think though for them, just their biggest hurdle is the consistency and also the inexperience at the top echelon of teams. And that's really going to be what will hold them back from potentially climbing up to an Olympic spot or an Olympic podium, or not podium, but spot for the US. And I just don't think it's in the cards for them this year, but I think they're a team that you should be watching out for. Um, Same thing with the Browns. The Browns are a brother-sister team. They're a very, very young, 20 and 22 years old. I think one cool thing about them is they have split training locations. They train both in Long Island and in Montreal. So for them, the skating skills are definitely their asset, and they're a very powerful team. You know, both of them get very good power through the depth of edge and cover a lot of ice. But again, just they don't have that experience at the top to really go and make an impact on the world stage at a high world level. I think if you put them at a world championship, they'd probably finish about 13th place is where I would factor them in. And that's not to say that they're not good skaters. It's just at this point in their career, they're just not as developed as some of the top teams um, to be one of those top teams that the US can send. And that just goes back, I think, to the depth of the US dance teams right now. The depth of the US ice dance right now is very tough because, I mean, this is the sixth place, or this could be the sixth or seventh place team in nationals this year. I mean, that's crazy. This team's a very, very talented. They won the um, Lake Placid International this to start this season, and they're fantastic skating skills, but it's just very crazy to think of how tough the dance field is in the US right now. Um, so kind of closing out this video series, I want to talk about more so I think of these teams of who will grab those final two spots. You know, we have Madison Chock and Evan Bates, who I've already said I think are 100% a lock for that team. Um, and when you look at the teams, I think that are in contention and then teams in the middle, I think that's the one where I look at is I'm looking at the Shibutanis through Emilia and Vadim. Those three teams right there. Alex and Maya, Caroline and Michael, Emilia and Vadim. I think Christina and Anthony, depending on their citizenship, if they get their citizenship, I think they are 100% probably a soft second lock. Um, you never know what could happen in dance in a year, but I would say if they get their citizenship, it is a bit of a soft lock because of the consistency, their ability to produce over the past quad, and the results at the Worlds, the four continents over the past two seasons specifically. I think that team would be a soft lock if they got their citizenship. But when you go to that in the middle of contention, this is where you get a lot of debate from skating fans alike is who would nab that final spot. And right now, looking specifically at the criteria, it would have to be Caroline and Michael because of what they've done over the past year, with Emilia and Vadim very close in second. Now, it will be interesting to see how Emilia and Vadim and Caroline and Michael compare on the Grand Prix scoring this season. Because if Emilia and Vadim start outscoring Caroline and Michael in the Grand Prix, I think some of the tides could start to change with the judges domestically, and you could see different results at nationals. Now, the Shibutanis, I think, are the 100% the biggest wild card for this third spot. And I think it goes back to how they are as skaters because Maya and Alex are without a doubt, I think much more of a talented team than Caroline and Michael and Emily and Vadim as dancers. I think they both have more experience or they have more experience and just are a much more refined, well-balanced team. Now they have been out for 7 years and they don't have experience in this judging system. they also do have the magic of the Marina Zueva with them, which can carry them, I think, pretty far. But it's going to be a question of whether or not they can come out there and produce as soon as possible, because I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them is they need to get out there and start producing results because they're already so behind compared to these other teams, specifically the two on the in the middle. But yeah, I think looking at these dance teams to continue the season, I think it really is going to be a great battle to see who will get that second and third spot. And where I think teams 1 through 4, right there from Christina and Anthony, Maya and Alex, Caroline and Michael, and Emily and Vadim, where those teams factor in the fall. I think that's going to be the biggest discussion from skating fans on social media is how those teams fare. And yeah, so that's pretty much wrapping up the first ever episode of Meet the Team or Meet the Players. So leave a comment below. Let me know if you liked this series and let me know if you have any suggestions or thoughts. If you'd like to see more of these videos, I'll have to splice together a lot of this video because I made some mistakes on my like following my PowerPoint, made some mistakes on the slides. So, there are some kinks that I'll have to work out, but I think this was a very interesting discussion and I hope you guys feel the same way. So feel free to like, subscribe, comment, follow us on Instagram and leave a comment below if this was something you liked. So yeah, thank you guys so much and we'll see you guys next week. All right, bye-bye.